Hello and welcome. Through his comedy routines, he's highlighted the injustice of Islamophobia and racism, created satire around America's fear of the Arab world, and generally raised awareness of how much misunderstanding there is between East and West. This week on One-on-One, meet Egyptian-American actor and comedian Ahmed Ahmed.
And people in the West, man, they always try to categorize us, put us all together. A lot of people come up to me and they're like, "Oh man, hey, where are you from?" I go, "I'm from Egypt." "Really? I got a friend from India."
In his largely biographical documentary film, Just Like Us, he traces his roots back to his small village in Egypt. But Ahmed Ahmed is now very much a part of the Arab-American scene. In fact, being born in Helwan, Egypt, and raised in Riverside, California, and then traveling extensively as a stand-up comic and actor, he's uniquely placed to recognize the problems the East has with the West and vice versa.
There's an echo. Story of my life. My name's Ahmed Ahmed.
Over time, it's become Ahmed's mission to address these negative stereotypes through comedy and by teaming up with other ethnically diverse comedians, as he did with the critically acclaimed Axis of Evil tour. Proud of both his Eastern origins and his Western home, Ahmed points out that Arabs in the USA, quote, went to bed September the 10th as Americans and woke up September the 11th as suspected terrorists.
Ahmed, great to have some time with you.
Thanks, Riz. Nice to be here.
Now, your time is right, isn't it? Because up to now, there's been such a bad image for Arabs, and particularly Arab Muslims. Even worse since 9/11, of course, the negative stereotyping. What luck have you had in breaking down some of those stereotypes?
The timing was great. In fact, one of the comedians in our film, Eric Griffin, has a great little saying for me. He says, "You know, Ahmed, you're rarely on time, but your timing is great." And, you know, you work in the media, so you see every newsreel is always an Arab, you know, trying to blow something up or burn an American flag or wish death to America. And, you know, that exists. And we're not going to, you know, shy away from that because it's definitely relevant, but on a small scale. The whole Middle East, for the most part, are just like us in a lot of senses when it comes to food, culture, and music, family. So we wanted to show that side of the Middle East because you never see it.
Has it always been a conscious part of your work to try to break down stereotypes?
I kind of did it, I kind of subconsciously, yeah. Like, when I got into the entertainment industry, I thought, okay, I want to be an actor. So I started acting, and I made a great living playing terrorists and cab drivers. And I was making money, so I didn't think about anything at the time. But then it got to a point where I got older, and I kept on playing those same roles. So I asked my agent one day, you know, "Hey, can I go out for the guy who has brown hair, you know, or the neighbor, or, you know, the Arab doctor, or whatever it was?" And unfortunately, back then, they just weren't casting Arabs and Muslims and Middle Easterners, brown people for that matter, from our part of the world, to play mainstream roles. So that's the point where I kind of made a conscious, like, I'm going to show them kind of decision. And I went broke. Went back.
That's the hazard, I guess.
That's the hazard. You make sacrifices to have a voice, and those sacrifices aren't always good sacrifices. So my acting work kind of dried up because I was really picky about the roles. I said, well, I'm not going to play a terrorist. I'm not going to play these parts. And there wasn't much work there for guys named Ahmed in Hollywood who's Muslim.
Double whammy, Ahmed
Ahmed, Muslim, Egyptian, in Hollywood. I've got everything going against me. So I kind of ran out of money, and I was going through this 6-month phase of what should I do. And I was forced to go back to waiting tables. And it was while I was waiting tables that I came across situations where I was forced to make my customers laugh. And that comedians and waiters have a lot in common, because at the end of the day, you're entertaining people, they get a bill at the end of the...
Yeah, I was going to say, I think places where service is a joke, but that's kind of different.
Well, the funny thing about our restaurant is that the food was awful. So I had to force my customers to laugh in order to earn tips. The tables were turned on this in this situation because the food wasn't great, so I had to give them great service. And so customers would come in and they'd try to order something that I knew wasn't good on the menu, so I would veer them away and say, no, don't get that, but get this.
Of course, the difference from acting and stand-up comedy is you're there with the audience. What sort of reception have you had, being an Arab, being on the circuit, and audiences can be tough?
They can be. Actors and comedians are also, have a lot of similarities in the sense that we're both sort of working off of a script. And it's entertainment at the end of the day. The difference with comedians is that you're the writer, you're the director, you're the producer, you're the actor. It's a one-man show. And most of the time you're not using an instrument, there aren't any sound effects, there's no green screen or let's cut and do that again. It's in the moment, it's very risque, it's very challenging. And, I lucked out because I was picked out by Mitzi Shore, who's the owner of the world-famous Comedy Store in Hollywood, to come perform on her stage back in the late 90s when Middle Eastern comics weren't allowed to do that. It was almost like being, it was almost like being a black guy in the 60s. It was almost like a civil rights movement happening through comedy. And so she put myself and a couple other Middle Eastern comics on her stage and gave us a voice and a platform, and eventually put our names, in lights on the marquee. So you drive down Sunset Boulevard and it says Ahmed Ahmed in lights, and which is unheard of in Hollywood. You just don't see comedy clubs and producers and directors or whatever promoting the Arab Muslim voice. And she actually was getting calls at one point. I remember her telling me, saying, why are you putting these guys on your stage? And her reply was, don't tell me how to run my club.
There are those people who think that in the Arab world there is no real sense of humor. Which, of course, it's not the case, but we'll get onto that in a moment. But of course, in the Middle East, there are limits on what you can talk about, what you can't. And in your documentary, just like us, you indicate how you were banned a couple of places, certainly for the kind of humor. What is no-go, from what you can tell?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Well, let's get it all out there.
Stick it where it hurts. Well, it's starting to open up. When we first went over there, it was like, you can't talk about sex, drugs, religion, or politics. So we'd always look at each other like, what's left? That's it. So like in Kuwait, for instance, or like some of the GCC countries, Bahrain, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi, of course, religion's definitely off limits. Anything religious, just don't touch it, don't go there. And so you don't have to because there's so much out there. Just being there was kind of edgy enough. I kind of made the mistake of doing a joke that was an observation about a nightclub and a mosque being across the street from each other in Dubai, which is true. And it gets laughs because it's true. But the authorities didn't like that when they saw it, so they placed a ban on me to not be able to perform there for a year publicly. The interesting thing was the joke wasn't even done in Dubai. It was done in our Comedy Central special, which ended up on YouTube. And some of the authorities saw it. And so when they heard I was coming, they said, no, he's making fun of Dubai and he's blasphemous toward Islam and that was it.
Double-edged sword because they're watching, but but they don't like what they see.
Right.
Are there any limits you have personally on what you would and wouldn't touch as material?
I personally think that, and look, it's all subjective. Like, if I do jokes about, being Muslim, most Muslims would say, oh, well, that's taboo. But sometimes Muslims will say, joke about the black guy or something like, is that taboo? But me personally, I don't touch, I try to stay away from handicapped people, cancer, rape, tragedies that aren't funny, and no matter how much time you let get in between the tragedy, right. Not enough time can be okay to make fun of that. So I try to not touch those topics.
Let me take you back. You were born in Helwan in Egypt,
right.
But actually your father was getting his immigration papers for the U.S. at the time and was standing in line at the U.S. Embassy and missed your birth.
Right.
Have you forgiven him for that?
No, he owes me. He missed my birth. No, the funny thing is he had tried to immigrate to Canada and Australia prior to that and was denied. So when this little window of opportunity opened up for Egyptians specifically to come to America, he was like, sorry, honey, I have to go get these papers. Deal with the pregnancy. So he was gone, and when he arrived back in, he had his papers in hand. I was already, delivered, and so he was like, "We're going to America." I was like, "I'm like a lion,
like Simba,
like a Lion King." You know, a bunch of African dancers came out of the closet. Dum 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 dum. It was cool, and then we ended up in Riverside, California, of all places.
That was when you were only a month old, of course, so you didn't get to discover Helwan until you were an adult and got back there, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, I went back younger. I went back when I was like 5 or 6. They had taken me back, but I had already been exposed a little bit to American culture. So like I knew what McDonald's was. So when they took me back when I was 5, I remember my parents having to go somewhere, and I started yelling and screaming and crying, "No, I want to go with you." And they said, "No, stay here." And I said, "I'll stay on one condition. I want McDonald's." And they said, because they lived in Helwan, back then was like so far away from the city. Back then they didn't even have McDonald's in Egypt. And they're like, "Oh, we don't have McDonald's, but we'll give you kufta." I was like, "I don't want kofta. I want McDonald's."
Meatballs, no.
No, meatballs and a pita back then with parsley. It was disgusting. Now it's good. You think about it. But when you're a kid, you want cheesy, greasy pickles.
Tell me about it, though, because you got to discover what your father actually had to struggle through when he was bringing up this young family, he was having children. He had it tough, didn't he?
Yeah, my dad, my dad had the quintessential, immigrant story. He was born and raised in Helwan, which is a very, third world, not very, economically savvy situation to be in, but they're happy and they're very filled with joy. But my dad was sort of on the cutting edge, and he'd been in the military and had gone to school, university, and worked in a factory, and he thought, I need to get out of here and go find a better life. So he immigrated to the U.S. and had $300 in his pocket, barely spoke any English, was pumping gas for $1.75 an hour back then, and just slowly but surely went through the struggle and raised 6 kids and lived the American dream.
Amazing. Yeah, and so he went off to find his fortune. You did the same thing at 19 in America, but you didn't cross an ocean. You went an hour away to Hollywood.
Yeah, my fortune's actually taken longer than my dad's. I should have just pumped gas and started there.
What were the early years for you like? What was going through your mind when you left home? I mean, 19, it's still, still quite young.
Riz, when you're 19, you feel like you have all the answers. You feel like you've figured it out. I had gone to college for like a year and a half, and I figured college is not for me. And I always wanted to be. I always had this vision I'd be in the entertainment industry. I just didn't know what it was going to be. And I remember literally sitting in class, listening to the professor, and just something in my head said, I don't want to do this. I'm going to go pursue my dream. So I left my book on the table, opened, left my backpack. I just literally got up and left. Teacher didn't even know I was leaving. And went home, and I walked through the front door, and I told my mom, well, she asked me first, what are you doing home? You're supposed to be in school. I said, I'm moving to Hollywood to be an actor. And she was just like, oh my God, what have I done wrong? Because an Arab parent always does something wrong if their kid wants to go chase this dream down. So then I eventually told my dad, and he thought I was like joining a cult. He wasn't really, he didn't understand it. And so that was tough, having your parents not support you emotionally. Forget about the financial. I'll go find a job. I just want their family support. So my dad kind of refused to be my father or even speak to me for several years because he was ashamed. And my mother, would secretly like slip me $20 bills here and there. Make sure you're eating and that kind of thing. But I moved to Hollywood. I became friends with Vince Vaughn, who's an awesome friend and brother, and he let me sleep on his couch for a year. This was before he was Vince Vaughn. So this is pre-swingers, pre-fame. Right. So here we are, these 2 kids running around in Hollywood trying to chase our dream, and I'm, waiting tables at night and sleeping on this poor guy's couch.
Just a quick thought, did you have any backup plans in case this gig didn't work out? Did you have any idea of what you might do if things...
My parents asked me that for so many years, because that was their whole thing. Go to school, then go be an actor or comedian. If it doesn't work, you have something to fall back on. But my philosophy was, if I have something to fall back on, then I will. But worst case scenario, if this thing doesn't work out, I'm really considering going to culinary school.
I
know it sounds weird, but I can cook.
That's good.
But I have this this passion for cooking. I grew up around it. So my mom was always cooking, but it was never like a teaspoon of this.
That's right. Yeah, you go by feel.
Yeah, it was always like a dash of this, a sprinkle of that, pour some olive oil here, and that's how I cook. And my mom sort of taught me that, but I really enjoy it.
How did the attacks of 9/11 change the shape of your career and the way things went for you?
Yeah, I mean, 9/11 just flipped everything on its head. You know, before September 11th, I was always talking about being from the Middle East and talking about being, you know, from an Egyptian background and having a dysfunctional Arab family and, you know, all the stuff that plays into the cultural aspect of who we are. And then September 11th happened, and then it was like having to talk about that on steroids because now there's a big magnifying glass on you. And there was a lot of backlash, a lot of hatred, especially in America, toward Arabs and Muslims. And, you know, because I was a comic, or I am a comic, but at the time I was traveling quite a bit, you know, it went from just getting on a plane and going to your gig to having a full-blown body scan and, you know, x-ray exam and go into this room and profile you and you're on a list and, you know.
And you were actually on a list.
Still am. Yeah, it's the old joke that I do when you Google my name, my official website pops up, and then right under that there's a link for the FBI's Most Wanted. And so
Is there no redress for that? It seems silly. You know, you're known, you've got people know you're not a threat, so it's...
You know what's so funny? Here's the funniest story that happened to me, and this was not too long ago, and it's happened a couple times. When I'm coming back from an overseas gig, my passport has a zillion stamps in it from so many different Arab countries. So oftentimes people will go, what were you doing in the Middle East? You've been to Yemen, Saudi, Syria? You know, like pretty much all the countries that people are afraid of.
That's when you get the free health check.
That's when you get the free, you get that free exam. It's gotten to the point now where when they're looking at my passport and they see all the stamps, they ask me, what were you doing in the Middle East? What sort of work do you do? And I say, I'm a comedian. And they go, really, what do you do? So they think I'm joking, but I have to show up, you know, maybe show a clip or show them a headshot or something from like you know, it's like I have to prove myself. But the most interesting thing and then the funniest thing that's happened to me a couple times recently is when I'm coming in through New York City. I remember a specific moment. I was coming through the immigration, and there was this older African-American gentleman standing behind the booth there, and I gave him my ID, and he's looking at my ID, and he's punching the computer, and he's staring at my ID, he's looking at me, and I think he's going to, you know, say something derogatory or something, and he goes, he said, you're a comedian, right? I said, yeah, I am. Now I think I have a break, you know? He goes, oh, yeah, man, you know, my wife and I were just watching your Axis of Evil comedy thing on the Comedy Central the other night, man. That is some funny stuff. Unfortunately, your name still comes up on this list, so I have to take you into this. I swear to God. And so he's escorting me into the detainee room, but he's pumping me up about how funny I am. And I just thought it was such a weird paradox. Like, here I am being praised for being funny, but also being detained for being an Arab. Go figure. Only in America.
Well, let me ask you about you know, how things have shaped up for you now, how perhaps things might be getting a little easier. Do you feel that there is any sense of that?
A little bit. Not very much. We still have a long road in front of us. And I don't blame Hollywood. I blame ourselves. I think it's up to the Middle Easterners, the Arabs, the Muslims, you know, yourself, people that are involved in media and social network and creating stories and developing ideas and directing and writing. It's our responsibility because who tells our story the best? We do.
While you were working in Hollywood, doing these big productions, You Don't Mess with the Zohan and all these different movies that you were involved with, how did you find the experience of working with the big names and, you know, the Hollywood names, the established names, and also the big production stuff?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you have that opportunity, which is rare, you take advantage of it. You know, I didn't play a terrorist in a movie for probably 10 years. And then Jon Favreau, who directed Iron Man, who's a friend of mine, and Peter Billingsley, who was the executive producer, who was a friend of mine. Now, these are two guys who started at the bottom and worked their way up into the A-list Hollywood. So I had friends in the industry. So when they called me up, they're like, hey, man, you know we're producing Iron Man. Do you want to be in it? And I was like, yes. And they're like, it's a terrorist. And I was like, okay, I'll just take what I can get at this point. Like I'm not gonna read for Tony Stark, you know, the main character. Right. So, but the great thing about Iron Man it was an international terrorist group. It wasn't just Arabs. Yeah. They had, you know, Malaysian and Indian and Pakistan. It was all mixed. So I didn't feel like I was like, no groups are gonna come at me. But it was fun. I got to work on a big budget, you know, action superhero movie, which is every actor's dream for the most part. And Robert Downey Jr. was really cool, and I got to work on the Zohan movie with Adam Sandler. And you know, Adam Sandler's got this really comfortable set where the catering is great, and he'll invite you to play basketball with him at lunch. And he's one of the nicest guys, and I was really honored to be in his film because Adam's one of those guys, if he likes you, he'll put you in stuff all the time. And I haven't been in anything since Zohan. So
there's a message in there somewhere.
Maybe you don't like me, Adam, but he was really fun, and you know, he tackled that topic, the Jewish Arab, you know, within a comedy with the Zohan. He was the first guy to kind of tackle that in a spoof, and I thought it was, you know, admirable of him.
Since Just Like Us, you seem to have made it something of a mission to get the comedy out there, do the international circuit, and particularly bring the Middle East to the American market, if nothing else. If they're not going to go out there and check it out, you seem to be wanting to say, well, I'm giving it to you. Is that the case?
Kind of, yeah. You know, I learned that when Vince Vaughn took me on his Wild West comedy show in 2005, it was a learning experience because, you know, he made it into a documentary, and because I'm friends with him and the producers and the editors, I was along for the ride and was able to kind of see what they did. But the mission that Vince was going for was that people in the Midwest and the South can't come to Hollywood to see a show. We're going to bring it to your backyard. And so I kind of used that same application. Well, if these Saudi kids or Egyptian kids or Lebanese or you know, Emirati kids can't fly to the United States to see a show in New York or Hollywood, then we're going to bring it to you guys. And the promoters were really great with working with us, and the fans were incredible.
And then by making the movies and showing them here, you're doing the reverse too.
Yeah, I mean, Americans get to see what it's like going over there. Our film, and you saw the film, it's really an inside peek through my eyes. Right. And it's, at the end of the day, it's an expensive home movie. It's not Avatar.
Your dad was the star.
My dad was the star. My dad thinks he needs an agent now. You should have had him on your show, Riz.
It's coming. Probably will happen.
It's coming, I know, right?
So, if you have something, you know, a list of things that you want to try and get done in the next, you know, decade or so, you know, what would it be? What are the burning ambition projects you have right now?
Well, the next decade, huh?
Well, I'm giving you that kind of time. I don't know, because I'm realizing it took you a while to get the break, you know. I'm cutting you.
You're giving me some time here. There's a book that I want to write about my life. There's just maybe two. There's a lot of information.
Just like me?
Just like them. Just in case.
Just in case.
My friend Eric Griffin said that on tour. He's like, you know what, we're going to call this the Just in Case tour. Just in case you get rich. Because I want to be a part of that.
I thought he meant just in case you get arrested again.
That too. But there's a book. There's like some cooking show ideas that I have. Okay. I'd like to open a restaurant one day. I'd like to take a break, actually, for like 6 months and just do nothing. But I think the book and the TV show idea are kind of the first couple things out of the gate, and then we'll see after that. Maybe start a family. That'd be nice to try that, you know, once. Yeah. It's like, are you married? No. Kids? No. What's wrong with you? Yeah. That's what people always say. How old are you? Really?
How would you like to be remembered? What would you like your legacy to be?
Gosh, I never thought about that. How would I like to be remembered? You know, I think probably, Riz, I think I'd want to be remembered as a guy who brought laughter to the world. That's pretty much it.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to come across as a person that thinks I have the answers, because I don't. I have nothing politically, you know, no political initiatives I'm looking for. Although people try to peg me as a political comic just because I am by default, by the name and my background and religious belief. But probably just somebody who just brought laughter to the world. You know, I think I'd be happy if that was put on my gravestone. He brought laughter to the world.
He had the last laugh.
He had the last laugh. Except for Dubai. He had the last laugh.
Ahmed, I wish you luck. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, man. Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to see you.